Hello, so this is going to be a video about 40mm filters and why sort of masks like the M50, which I've got here, probably aren't going to be replacing them anytime soon. So lots of people look at the M50 and the GSR and they go, wow, they're really futuristic looking masks, and that's a really cool idea they've got with their filters. You know, they're going to definitely be the masks of the future. That may very well be the case, but I sort of doubt it, and there's a reason for that. So my reason for doubting that masks like this are going to become, you know, the future masks, I'm also going to take these filters off at the moment, because apparently you shouldn't leave the M50 with the filters stored on it, at least not the older models like I've got, because as people pointed out to me in the video, the reason that these self-sealing bits haven't been sealing properly is because these rubber valves, if the filters are left on them for too long, kind of get stuck in the up position. So in theory you're meant to store these with the filters off, and then they made replacement valves which were much stronger, so it wouldn't matter if the filters were left on them for years. So there's that. But anyway, why are masks like this not going to be replacing 40mm, despite the fact they've got, you know, more advanced features like self-sealing ports? I think simply for the reason of logistics. Now, 40mm is like the current gas mask standard. You've got, with respirators, you've got the M50 and the GSR, which aren't 40mm out of like mainstream service masks. Then you have lots of companies like 3M and, you know, all those companies that do like civilian industry masks that make their own proprietary filters, so only their brand of filters fit on their masks. So that's like your kind of options. You've got a filter unique to the M50, a filter unique to the GSR. They don't work with each other, they're a different kind of fitting. Then you've got 40mm that like 90% of all the masks in the world use. You've got 60mm, which was the outdated standard, and then you've got, you know, like proprietary filters for brands. Now with 40mm you do obviously have the difference between 40mm NATO and 40mm GOST. Obviously the majority of the world uses 40mm NATO, and it's just a couple of countries like Russia and some of the ex-Soviet countries which still use GOST. And obviously you get interesting things as well, like normalised filters like this Polish FP5 filter, which actually, you know, can work with either NATO or GOST mask, so, you know, great. So, you know, what makes the 40mm, you know, why is it not going anywhere in my opinion? Well, as I said, simply logistics, where if you're trying to make a mask that does a unique thing and uses a unique filter, like the M50's filters, you know, as opposed to the filter absolutely everybody uses, you're going to need to have some really good selling points to get your masks, you know, out there. And that's not really, you know, the case. I'm not saying that the M50 is a bad mask, it's certainly not. But, you know, I prefer it in 40mm, to be honest. And there is even the Avon C50 that a few countries use, which literally is the M50 in 40mm. So, you know, there's things like that. The issue is that if you've got a filter that everybody in the world uses, for logistical reasons, it's very bad to try and replace that. Because with 40mm being NATO standard, you know, you want to have standardised equipment all across NATO. You know, the same reason like 5.56 ammunition or 7.62 NATO can be used in all the rifles and things like that. You want stuff where, you know, no matter the nation, they've got the right equipment stockpiled so you can use it, whether it be ammunition, you know, or filters. So when you move away from that, you've got a bit of a problem, because none of your allies can actually supply you with equipment. And you can't, you know, help them either, because you're using different filters than all your allies. So Britain with the GSR currently can't use filters with any other NATO members, because nobody else uses the GSR in NATO as far as I'm aware. Similarly, America's got the same problem, where they've got the M50, and of course America is the most important nation in NATO, because they're kind of like the one that's most responsible for everything, but again they're using a different brand of filter, or different style of filter than everybody else, because they've got the M50 filters that only work on the M50, not other 40mm NATO masks, and vice versa. So you've got that issue. So when people say to me, oh, should I not get a 40mm mask because there's masks like the M50 and the GSR? No, because if you want to get filters for your mask easily, you need 40mm, just simply because there's so many of them about. 40mm is so popular that even civilian industry uses them, called RD40 filters. So, you know, 40mm NATO filters are not going anywhere. I think what's going to happen is eventually America and Britain are going to get sick of masks like the M50 again. They're not bad masks, I just don't think, you know, because they're not the standard filter, even if they can do more unique things. You know, the selling point of the filters for this is that when you take them off the mask to do a filter change, the mask self-seals, so you can calmly change the filter without the risk of gas getting into the mask. So yeah, that's a good feature, I'm not going to deny that, it's better than not having that feature, but if it comes at the extent of not being able to have a 40mm filter on the mask, you know, the bulk standard NATO one that everybody uses, that's a problem. So what a solution to this could be is, if you had, let's just pretend this is a 40mm mask for a moment, you had your 40mm filter on it, you could have like a switch here or something similar, so when you need to take your filter off, you flick the switch, it blocks the airflow to that filter, or filter port, you take the filter off, you can calmly change it, put the new filter back on, then put the switch in the other direction to let air back through. That would work fine. I don't see why that would be a problem. You know, that should be absolutely fine in my opinion. I don't see why that wouldn't work, or something similar. You could even have, you know, you could even come up with a really lightweight 40mm system if you wanted to do that, where you'd have 40mm filters that weighed just as much as these, you know, maybe make them a bit wider at that direction but flatter. You know, so they've still got a particulate filter and charcoal in them, but they, you know, each filter's a bit lighter. If you're going to go down the dual filter route, I don't see why that would be a problem. You know, that works. There's lots of ways you could do it to still have 40mm filters and some of the more advanced features of these masks. Interestingly, Avon's newer masks, I think the FM53 and maybe a couple of others, are still 40mm. And interestingly, the FM12, which Avon also makes, is apparently their best-selling mask, despite the fact it's basically the upgraded S10. Why? Because the mask doesn't cost as much and 40mm filters are easily available. So if you're a nation looking to buy a mask, you say, what mask is good enough for the job? Okay, all of them are good enough. The FM12 is the cheapest. That's also got the filters that are cheapest in the long run and will have the least supply problems with. Let's go for that. So, you know, it makes a lot of sense to just keep using 40mm filters if you're a nation, and as an individual if you're thinking of buying a mask, as said, and you're, you know, using it for some sort of prepping purpose or practical purpose, you want to get the mask where you can buy the filters most easily and cheapest, like anywhere. So 40mm masks are better for that, not, you know, like the weird bayonet filters or self-sealing filter models that are popular now. So again, this isn't to say the M50 is a bad mask, it seems to be a very good mask in of itself, other than the fact I've got the one with the old valve design on it. But, you know, again, I don't think it's a good replacement for a 40mm mask. Just simply because 40mm is the standard now. As I said, this tries to do certain things, and I think it, for the most part, manages them. Certainly better than the GSR did, but I've already been over that. But, you know, as I said, moving away from 40mm at the moment doesn't make sense. Unless you get every nation to adopt the same mask like this one, or you make sure they all use the same kind of filters like these, there's no point moving away from it, because if you're moving away from it, you really need to get everybody on board so you can have a new standardised filter. What you can't really do is all go to one, like half the nations go to one mask, half the nations go to the other. There's no standardisation of parts, and then, you know, your NATO equipment alliance doesn't really work in, you know, work in that way. So there we go. Masks like the M50, yes, they're good, but 40mm isn't going to be replaced anytime soon, unless I'm horribly wrong. Just simply for the fact that, you know, 40mm is the one everybody uses and it works fine, so why replace it?